The show begins as a plane from Berlin approaches touchdown at the JFK airport in New York. One of the flight attendants, Rose, is contacted by her co-worker, Peter, for immediate help. He is convinced that there is something moving in the cargo hold below the main level of the plane. Within a few minutes, a hooded black figure attacks both of them. In the next scene, we see that the flight lands at the airport. However, the ground crew does not receive any response from the pilots. Concerned with this situation, the Port Authority officer, Peter Bishop, goes to the runway to investigate the matter. He finds that the plane is unusually cold and all but one of the window shades are down. Bishop calls in emergency services, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Meanwhile, the head of CDC's Rapid Response Team, Ephraim Goodweather, meets up with his son Zach and wife Kelly at a family counseling office. Kelly tells her husband that she wants to end their marriage. She already has a new boyfriend, Matt Sales. Before the counseling session can be over, Ephraim is urgently called to JFK Airport through a phone call. At the airport, Ephraim meets his team, fellow epidemiologists, Nora and Jim. Everyone believes all of the passengers are dead. Also present on the scene are the Homeland Security team, who believe that this might be a terrorist attack rather than a viral outbreak. In response, Ephraim explains to them the contagious nature of viral infections and how a simple virus can lead to a devastating plague. After a bit of debate, they agree to let the CDC officials go in first. In some other part of New York, a pawn shop dealer, Abraham Setrakian, hears about the plane from Berlin on the news. He seems to know what caused this strange occurrence. After fending off 2 shoplifters, he goes to a secret room to prepare. There, he sits next to a beating heart in a jar and slightly cuts his finger, dropping a few drops of blood into the jar. Several worm-like things come out of the heart and start to feed on the blood. We then shift back to Ephraim and Nora as they prepare to enter the plane. He tells Nora how his wife has already filed for divorce. Hearing this, she asks if he told his wife about their affair, but Ephraim says there is no reason to tell her now. Following this, the two enter the plane and find that the passengers are dead. There is no sign of violence, but some sort of strange splatter is seen all over the plane under UV light. After taking samples, Ephraim heads to the rear of the plane where the cargo hold door is busted open. On the other hand, Nora enters the cockpit and finds one of the pilots alive. She turns around and 2 passengers are looking at her. As she screams for help, one of the passengers tells her to turn off her flashlight. Ephraim rushes towards her, but a passenger grabs him, asking for help. Immediately, he calls the paramedics for the survivors. The next scene takes us to the headquarters of the Stoneheart Investment Group, where a mysterious man named Thomas Eichorst visits the CEO of the group, Aldrich Palmer. Palmer is old, very sick, and currently undergoing dialysis. When he finishes the procedure, Eichorst tells Palmer that his cargo has arrived at JFK Airport and that there are survivors on the plane. The CEO knows there is no going back now from whatever plan the two agreed to. He then says he can't get used to Eichorst breathing. In response, the mysterious stranger says he misses breathing sometimes. Although neither of them expands anything more on the subject, we now know that Eichorst is not human. On the other hand, Ephraim and Nora update the head of CDC, Dr. Everett Barnes, on the status of the bodies and the survivors. They plan to quarantine the survivors until further investigation. Nora says that they don't know what caused this outbreak or if the survivors are contagious, and urge Dr. Barnes to not get the press involved. Next, they examine the 4 survivors who appear really pale, but have no serious injury. Attorney Joan Luss, musician Gabriel Bolivar, Captain Doyle Redfern, and another passenger Ansel Barber do not remember what happened after the plane landed. But Mr. Barber says he hears a humming noise in his ears. Then Ephraim, Nora, Jim, and Bishop look at the manifest from the plane. There is a tall box with strange carvings in it. When they open the box, they find it is filled with soil. Nora discovers a latch on the inside of the box. Suspecting some foul play, Ephraim suggests Bishop call Berlin to find out who loaded the box onto the plane. A few minutes later, Bishop is alone in the warehouse, talking on the phone with the officials in Berlin. He hears a high-pitched hum and looks around the airport warehouse for the origin. To his surprise, he finds a heap of cloth lying on the floor. Suddenly, a monster springs up from the heap and grabs Bishop. The monster injects a parasite into his body and kills him after sucking all his blood. The frightening creature then leaves the warehouse. The next scene takes us to Harlem, where a local young man, Gus Elizalde, is approached by Eichorst. The mysterious stranger pays Gus to pick up a truck from the JFK airport. When Gus finishes the job, he promises that his mother's immigration status will change and his brother's criminal record will be erased. Before leaving, Eichorst tells Gus the 3 rules he must follow: do not examine the cargo, do not make any stops, and cross the Manhattan Bridge before daybreak. When we return back to the airport, Setrakian arrives to see a crowd of people waiting to see survivors of the plane from Berlin. He sees Jim talking to security and pretends to be ill to get his attention. Jim falls for it and Setrakian informs that he needs to speak to someone in charge. Meanwhile, Ephraim meets the families of the passengers in the lobby of the airport. To his displeasure, the press is there as well. However, he is honest with the gathered crowd and announces that 206 passengers died, and there are only 4 survivors. The father of one of the passengers, Gary Arnott, comes forward and slaps the epidemiologist. The devastated father just wants to see his daughter, dead or alive. Shaken, Ephraim asks the crowd to give him 48 hours and walks away with a heavy heart. When they get away from the crowd, Ephraim and Nora video chat with a medical examiner. Then he shows them an incision on the throat of one of the dead passengers. It is a deep, precise cut, and surprisingly, none of the passengers have any blood. But the call is interrupted by Jim, who tells Ephraim to talk to an old man, Setrakian. The mysterious old man says he has seen this outbreak before but can't explain what he knows without sounding crazy. Hence, Ephraim dismisses him and heads back to his work. Before the cops can take him away, Setrakian yells at the CDC team to decapitate the heads of both the dead and living passengers and destroy their bodies immediately. He then urges them to not let the coffin cross the Hudson River into Manhattan. A few hours later, F and Nora find a small worm-like creature in the cargo hold of the plane. They keep it in a container for examination and determine that some sort of parasite killed the passengers. Suddenly, Nora finds soil near the worm specimen, and they hurry back to the warehouse to look for the soil sample from the coffin. To their utter surprise, the coffin is gone and the security guards in the warehouse have no idea where it went. Concerned, the epidemiologist duo ask to see the security footage. In it, they see some strange robed figure swoop in and take the coffin in one swift motion. Ephraim says the footage was just a few minutes ago, so the coffin should still be at the airport. He calls Jim and tells him to stop all trucks and large vehicles moving in and out of the airport. Meanwhile, Gus finds the vehicle that he's supposed to steal. It is a CDC van and it has the coffin loaded inside. But a security personnel stops his van before he can get out of the airport. Suddenly, Jim arrives at the spot and informs the security guards to let the van pass through as it is a CDC vehicle. Before the van can leave, Jim instructs Gus to tell his boss that he won't do any more favors for them. Elsewhere, the ME opens up one of the bodies for examination. There are several unusual growths on the heart of the dead. While he is examining one of them, a worm-like creature comes out of the heart and enters his wrist. He desperately tries to extract the worm using a scalpel, but when he turns around, the dead passengers are all walking toward him. Together, they attack him at once and devour the blood in his body. At the police station, Setrakian is put in lockup and informed they can't release him until Monday. Meanwhile, Gary Arnott returns home from the airport when his little daughter Emma, who is pronounced dead in the plane incident, walks in through the back door. She says she is cold and her father hugs the little child. When we return back to the airport warehouse, the police investigate the murder of Peter Bishop. While they are investigating the crime scene, Ephraim receives a phone call that the 4 survivors are being released by the hospital. He immediately rushes to the hospital and tells them they are under quarantine and under no circumstances can leave the premises. In the meantime, Abraham is informed that a lawyer has arrived at the prison to see him. The old man is shocked when he heads to the visitor station and comes face to face with Thomas Eichorst. At this point, it is clear that the two know each other and have a bitter history behind them. Mocking the old man, Eichorst asks him if he still believes in his God and inquires about the antique sword that was mentioned in his police report. Furthermore, he brags about killing a woman who apparently meant a lot to Abraham back in the day. In response, the pawn shop owner reminds Eichorst that he killed his partner with his sword, and he will make sure that he kills Eichorst as well. At the JFK airport, Ephraim and Nora meet with Margaret Pearsons, the head of Health and Human Services. She informs them the plane is not a CDC case anymore, and the passengers died of a faulty air system. However, Ephraim argues with her that the patients clearly died of a venereal disease, but she doesn't want to hear it. She points out that if they put New York under quarantine, it will stop all business and crash the economy. Margaret then sends Ephraim and Nora home and tells them they are off the case. However, the duo head to a bar and meet with the pilot of the plane. He says he is feeling a little sick and has a buzzing in his ears. When they ask him about the crate that is missing from the plane, the pilot replies that government officials showed up at the last minute and put the cargo on the plane. He didn't question it because they seemed legit. Later, Ephraim and Nora head back to their quarantined lab to run some more tests on the worm they extracted. There, he learns that every time they give the worm a little bit of blood, it reacts and becomes livelier. In the next scene, we are introduced to Vasily Fett, a member of pest control who heads into a restaurant and inspects the kitchen. The chef tries to pay him off, but he brushes his bribery off as he finds traces of rat urine underneath the cupboard. He tells the chef to shut his restaurant down and heads out into the dining area and shows the patrons the rat he just found. Meanwhile, the survivors of the plane are also eating at the restaurant with the other guests. They are experiencing strange symptoms like buzzing in the ears and bloody gums. Following this, Gabriel, one of the survivors of the plane, heads home to his penthouse to have a threesome with 2 random groups. His night turns seriously weird when he bites one of the girls in the neck and she begins bleeding everywhere. Even when the girls run out while screaming he is a freak, he doesn't seem to mind. He then drops to the floor and starts licking up drops of blood that the girl dripped when she ran out. Meanwhile, Nora and Ephraim head to the hospital where they sent the airplane pilot. They check in on him and realize his condition has worsened. After checking him with a UV light, they realize his entire body is covered with tiny worms crawling under his skin. Ephraim rushes out to call Dr. Bennett at the morgue and see if he has any test results on the dead passengers, but his calls are unanswered. The duo immediately heads to the morgue to see why Dr. Bennett isn't answering their calls, and the results from the bodies they sent him. En route to the morgue, Ephraim receives a phone call from Gary, Emma's father. He apologizes for the way he behaved and thanks him for sending Emma home. This confuses Ephraim because the little girl was dead when he found her on the plane. But Gary says that she showed up on his doorstep alive, and well a few hours ago. Shortly after, Ephraim and Nora arrive at the office of the medical examiner, and the phones are ringing off the hooks. They head into the morgue and find a room full of empty body bags, and Dr. Bennett is nowhere in sight. On the other hand, Gary heads into the bathroom to get Emma out of the bathtub. He invites her to come eat dinner and listen to the Lion King soundtrack with him. She says she is hungry and then latches onto her dad's neck and kills him. When the scene shifts to Thomas Eichorst, we see that he is different from other men. It takes a lot of work for Eichorst to look like everyone else. He has prosthetic ears, nose and neck, contact lenses, dentures, and a wig. He uses quite a bit of makeup to finish his tailored look. As he looks forward to the day, he reassures himself that soon he will no longer have to hide behind his mask. Meanwhile, Ephraim, Nora Martinez, and Jim Kent meet Everett Barnes at the CDC headquarters. Barnes says he thinks the military took the 206 dead bodies because they don't want the corpses autopsied. He also reminds the other epidemiologists that they are no longer a part of the investigation. But when Ephraim asks Barnes why the military would leave 4 survivors, he doesn't have an answer. At that moment, Jim steps away to make a call. He is nervous about what he has done. As we saw earlier, it was Jim who let the van with the coffin go through security. They then visit Captain Doyle Redfern at the hospital and find that his infection has gotten worse. Later, Jim goes to meet with Greg at the Stoneheart Investment Group headquarters, but instead, he is greeted by Eichorst. He hands Jim an envelope of money, but the junior epidemiologist says he's going to the police. In response, Eichorst mentions Jim's wife, Sylvia, who has cancer. The investment group Stoneheart makes a drug that could help her. However, Sylvia was initially rejected from the drug trial. If Jim takes the money and continues to work for the group, Eichorst offers to get her in the trial. Elsewhere, after Abraham Setrakian's trial for interference with security procedures is waved off, Nora approaches him outside the courthouse. He says that he knows the bodies have disappeared and knows where they are going. Just like at the airport, the old man tells her to find every last passenger and destroy the bodies. Until she can do that, she is no use to him. We then shift to Ansel, the 4th survivor from the plane, who wakes up to his dog licking his face. He looks in the mirror and finds his eyes are bloodshot and his teeth are sharp. Following this, he goes downstairs to the refrigerator and takes out a raw steak, drinking the blood in the pan. Ansel looks up and sees his wife watching him. Ansel is not the only passenger feeling the physical changes. Bolivar, the singer, is also sick. Later that day, Bolivar's doctor gives him a bunch of prescriptions for everything that is wrong with him. When he shows the doctor his genitals, he tells the singer to go to the nearest hospital immediately. That night, Bolivar takes out his contacts and sees that his bloodshot eyes are worse. When he takes off his wig, he sees that a lot of his hair is gone. Furthermore, his skin is gray and splotchy and he no longer has genitals. Meanwhile, in Queens, Fett goes to the home of a hedge fund trader whose daughter was bitten by a rat. There, he catches a rat and gives the trader a history lesson about the building. Outside, he sees an alarming number of rats above ground, running from a drain and into the river. Back at the hospital, Captain Doyle is getting worse by the minute. Ephraim wants the doctors to operate him immediately in order to save his life. On the other hand, Doyle hears a voice and says he is here. When Nora scans him with a UV light, they see the worms are everywhere in his body. Shortly afterwards, Jim shows up at the hospital and tells his colleagues about Sylvia's drug trial acceptance. But their celebration is cut short when they hear that Captain Doyle has abruptly disappeared from the operation theater. Shocked, the 3 epidemiologists split up to find him. Soon enough, Jim finds the pilot drinking a bag of blood in the basement. But Doyle doesn't look human any longer, as his skin is ashy gray, and there are tentacles coming out of his mouth. With frightening speed, he turns around and grabs Jim. Just as the strange creature is about to devour his blood, Nora interrupts. Doyle flings his prey with relative ease and pounces at Nora. Fortunately, Ephraim makes his way to the basement just as the creature is about to attack Nora. The epidemiologist is shocked at the sight of Captain Doyle's new form and freezes on the spot. Suddenly, Doyle's tongue shoots out of his mouth straight for Ephraim, who manages to dodge it at the last second. Nora tries to ward off the beast with a pole, but he grabs the makeshift weapon with his tongue and flings it aside. Thinking right on the spot, Ephraim hits Doyle with a fire extinguisher, and he falls to the ground. However, the captain isn't down for long as he grabs Nora's legs. Enraged, the epidemiologist uses the extinguisher to bash the creature's head in. As the end credits roll in, the 3 of them stare at the remains in disbelief. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.